could be bigger than VMware itself, it could be bigger than the internet. And I'm not going to steal Eddie's thunder, but I truly think it's an important topic, and we need to start learning about new technologies, and that's why Eddie's here. I'm going to let him finish miking up before I kick it off to him. But I met Eddie through Mike DiPetrillo. Mike's spoken here before, and is a great speaker, great friend. And Mike convinced me, said, Mike, we need someone a little more dynamic. We need someone who knows this stuff and can take people to the weeds. And the first person I thought about was Ed. So I'm happy to meet him. He'll stay here for a bit. He's got a flight. He's got to catch around 1 o'clock. But I truly believe this is a really important topic. And take some time, listen to what he's saying, and pick his brain afterwards. With that, Eddie.
Okay, this is weird. So I got to tell you, my home is United Airlines, but I pay my mortgage in Austin, Texas. I'm originally from the East Coast. And I've been with VMware for 10 years, and in the span of that time, I've heard quite a bit about this VMUG, which has evolved into the VTUG, and it's been rave reviews. So I'm very happy that it took me this long to be here. Well, actually, I'm not really happy that it took me this long to be here, but I'm happy to be here. I'm not happy that I have to leave early, so my goal today is basically to run through this presentation, and I know that there'll be people following me, but I plan on staying in the hallways, and any way that I can interact with you and answer any questions, talk about technology, I'm happy to do that. So with that being said, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I've been with VMware, like I said, for 10 years. The first 3 years were with strategic accounts. The last 7 have been mapped to our global accounts. And my role right now is I'm a principal systems engineer. I have a dual role in the office of the CTO, where I focus on the software-defined data center and also the NFV Telco vertical. And in that NFV Telco vertical, it lends itself to a lot of emerging technologies, obviously, like things like open source, open stack, even what we're talking about today, which is blockchain. And so, in working with Chris, we knew that blockchain was a hot topic for everyone, personally and also from a professional perspective, and we came up with this topic of why you should care and what you should know. Right? So, I told you a little bit about myself. What I'd like to do is learn a little bit about all of you. So maybe by a show of hands, how many of you are, I know we're all techies in here, right? But how many of you techies are folks that are either writing code or have your hands on a keyboard more days than not? Cool. Okay, and then how many of you, by a show of hands, are more so on the business analytics side of things? Okay. And then how many of you, by a show of hands, are more on the leadership side? You're either a manager, director, VP, CXO, okay. Okay, got it. All right. That helps me out quite a bit. Okay, so then maybe we just jump into this, yeah? And I don't know why it's racing. But you're gonna get a head start on most of my slides if this keeps up. Okay. Anyone know this guy? By a show of hands? One in the back. It's not the lost child of someone you know. Take a good look. It's not Mark Zuckerberg's son. It's not him as a youth. Anyone have an idea? Okay. Give you a clue. Don't know why we're leapfrogging, but we'll do it. This is Eric Finman. And what you need to know about Eric Finman is that Eric Finman is a high school dropout. But he's not any high school dropout. He's an 18-year-old high school dropout who's a millionaire. So at this moment you should be feeling a little underwhelmed, as I was, because this means that for him to be this successful in 2017, and he's 18 now, he started thinking about this roughly around the age of 11 or 12. That's when he first started investing in Bitcoin. Eric had a bet with his parents. Eric didn't want to go to high school, he didn't want to go to college, and so he made a deal with his family and said, if I find a way to become a millionaire before it's time for me to go to college, let's make a deal that I don't have to go to college. And this is what Eric did. Now the interesting thing about this story is not so much about Eric, because there are a number of Erics. Not so much Eric is an anomaly because of his age, but from the sense of someone that's become a millionaire because of Bitcoin, That's relatively common at this point. But in my mind, when I read these stories of millionaires that not overnight millionaires, but for all intents and purposes, I mean, he's only 18. In a short span of time, these folks have become millionaires because of Bitcoin. I feel like Bitcoin, as a technologist, is really the bright, shiny object. I really believe that the critical component of stories like this are the underlying technology. And in this case, that underlying technology is blockchain. So that's what I want to focus on today. I don't know why it's doing that. But you'll get a fast forward on every slide, I suppose. Here's the agenda. The reality of the matter is that I could spend a full day with you, I could spend 2 days with you, I could spend close to 5 days with you, and we still would not cover everything about blockchain in full depth. And the reason being is because there are some things that are known about blockchain, but there are a lot of things that are not known about blockchain. So if for those of you that have done research, you know that there are concrete things that you can hold to the grain, to the fire, but there are other things that are all about opinion and speculation of where the industry is going to go and what's going to be next, and possible use cases for blockchain technology. And then in addition to that, you have to focus on, well, what's my role in this storyline? You know, just by a showing of hands, we had 3 primary types of folks in here, right? We have the folks that are hands-on. You folks that are hands-on, you might be interested in actually contributing code, right? You might actually be interested in doing some exchanges. Another group of you might be thinking about, well, how does this impact my business? Is there a way that I could leverage this technology to be more efficient, get a greater ROI? And then some of you might be thinking like me, hey, this might be the next best thing since the internet or since white sliced bread. How do I craft my career to be shaped in parallel with where Bitcoin and blockchain and subsequent technologies are going? And then there's the last group, which I've also fallen in on, I suspect many of you fall in, which is you just think this stuff is cool and you want to see where it goes, right? So in the course of the 50 minutes that I have to share with you, I plan on, my goal today is to whet your palate on blockchain, right? At the end of the day, I want you, hopefully, to say, hey, the VMware guy got me charged up about blockchain, about how I might be able to use it, how I might be able to leverage it from a financial perspective, or how I might be able to change my business, or just I learned something today, or I might want to go research something. That's my goal, that's my charter today, right? This isn't going to be a VMware pitch about, hey, you need to buy all of our products, and no, that's not what today is about. I'm happy to talk to you about any of our products after this session, but today's session is more R&D focused. And sure, at the very end, I'll talk about areas of blockchain that VMware as a company that we're investigating and exploring, but today is more educational for you. And I think that falls in line with VTUG. Is that fair? All right, cool. All right, let's see if I can get one slide to go at a time now. Maybe not. Let's try this. Okay. Arrows are good. Okay. No, they're not. All right. Isn't that always, so we're a bunch of techies, right? Isn't this always the way it goes? It's like, it's not a demo, it's a presentation, but whenever you have to do a demo prime time, there's something that goes wrong. Anyway, the good news is that the content is all here, so we might fast forward back and forth, but the content is all here and here. All right, so when I think about blockchain, I consider it to be a foundational technology. And right now, the buzzword, the jargon that you always hear in the industry is, oh, it's disruptive. This new technology is disruptive. When I was a software developer, I worked at a company called PowerQuest, for those of you that are old enough to remember it. And our tagline was, it's jaw-dropping technology. Everything, if it's not jaw-dropping, then we're not going to play with it. Today's era is disruptive, and I fundamentally disagree with calling blockchain disruptive. Denotatively, when you think about foundational technology, it typically requires 2 different things. It has an economic impact, and it has an impact to society. And that's what we're seeing right now. It's to be determined if it's going to be disruptive. It's to be determined if it's going to be transformational. But right now, we're looking at a foundational technology. If we look at what the smart folks at Harvard have said, blockchain is the technology most likely to change the next decade of business. It can change the way we securely and privately move and store, and this is important, money, titles, deeds, music, art, scientific discoveries, intellectual properties, and even votes. That should have resonated with almost everyone in this room. If we listen to Klaus Schwab, who's the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, he said, blockchain is fast becoming the symbol of the fourth industrial revolution. So the question you should be thinking now, and since most of us are, I believe that all of us in here are techies, I'm going to pretend that you're thinking the way I think, and that's from an engineering perspective. And a lot of it has to do with why, and if this, then why this, right? And that's how my mind works. And so if you subscribe to what I just said here, or actually what Harvard and what Klaus Schwab said, then you're kind of wondering to yourself, how did we get here? And the only way that you can do that is by looking at your past. He says as he tries to click one time. But does not. We had two. Okay, we're getting better. So a trip down memory lane. In October 2008, a paper was published by Satoshi Nakamoto. Now, here's the irony about Satoshi Nakamoto. We don't know if that's his real name. It could be an alias. That's yet to be determined in this mystery of Bitcoin and blockchain. What we do know is that a paper was written called Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. In 2009, Bitcoin was launched as the first cryptocurrency. And of course, the technology underneath that was blockchain. Anyone seeing a correlation with the dates, with the years specifically? That's a question. Anyone? What's that? Thank you. Recession. Stock market crash. Interesting time to introduce this new type of currency, isn't it? Coincidence? Possibly. Leave that for you to interpret. Move down memory lane. May 2010, 10,000 Bitcoins were paid for 2 pizzas. Think about that. The current evaluation of a Bitcoin right now is over $2,000. So do the conversion in your head about this pizza, these 2 pizzas. In 2013, and what I'm doing right now is showing you the adoption, how the adoption expanded over this timeline. In 2013, some websites started accepting Bitcoin for payment, and in 2014, financial institutions started thinking about, hey, is there a way that we can leverage this in our business? Now, 2015 was an important year for blockchain because there were 2 evolutions that took place. The first one was in July with Ethereum being launched, and we'll talk about that in more detail. I look at that as the second evolution of blockchain. And the third one, in December of 2015, was from the Linux Foundation. And that's when they founded, where they initiated the open source Hyperledger project. And there are a lot of other companies that help support that one. So we'll talk about those 3 layers. One click. Maybe. All right. Now, as we go down that path of adoption, the nature of our industry and our culture always wants to make a comparison. And the comparison that folks want to make right now is that blockchain is like the internet, the same type of things. And they're using the metrics, right? Similar investment levels, similar excitement levels, similar visions of potential uses. Well, in my mind, again, I'm an engineer. I think it's TBD at this point. I mean, we know where the internet is, right? We don't know where blockchain is yet. We know we're off to a great start, but we don't know where it is yet. That being said, are there high investment levels? Yeah, I mean, that's what the Linux Foundation represents and nothing else. Are there similar excitement levels? Based on your energy and my energy, I would say yes. In the development community, I'd say yes. Are there similar visions of potential uses? Gotta say yes. You know, if you think about the internet, it falls into that, initially, that foundational technology. So there are some similarities there, and if you look at the curve, you can see the early adoption. Obviously, the developers are leading the path. One click. All right. Somebody in the back is messing with me. I don't know who it is, but hopefully I'm passing the test. All right. So where are you? No. I said my prayers last night. I don't understand. All right. Let's just. Okay. Life happened. I rebooted my laptop before I came here, so maybe that's the problem. You don't have to reboot it back. Maybe that's the lesson I'm learning. So the next question you should be thinking to yourself, obviously, we're talking about adoption here, right? It should be the types of use cases potentially, and who's going to be using blockchain. And you can see here, you know, the people that are going to benefit from it initially are going to be the people in fintech, right? Secondarily, you look at identity management. You look at property titles, and then you look at communication, and the list goes down from there. One click. Stay. All right? But now you should be asking, okay, I get it. I get the market. I get the landscape. What the heck is it? How many of you are familiar with databases? Great. Great. When you think about a relational database, what's the best and the worst thing about it? It's a question. The answer is actually up there. It's centrally managed, right? It's centrally managed. That is the one thing that we're protecting with every database. We're always thinking about how we're going to keep the uptime, fault tolerance, business continuity, disaster recovery, because of that one particular thing. If we lose that ledger, what happens? Right? And this is where blockchain comes into play. One click, buddy. This is where blockchain comes into play, because there's no longer this centrally managed environment. It's all about the group. It's all about us. If we all represented one group, each one of you represented a node, right? And I propose to make a request for a transaction. There has to be consensus. Now, there are a number of different... Consensus is one of the most complicated features within blockchain. But by definition, consensus means that the body of us agree on something, correct? And that's what has to happen in blockchain. It's the best thing about blockchain, in my humble opinion. The fact that I don't have to worry about a third party. The group is who approves it. Now, in order for the group to approve it, we said we don't have a centrally managed system. What does that mean? It means that all of us have to be equal from a node perspective. And from a node perspective, that means that all of us have to have the same ledger. So it's a peer-to-peer network is what I'm getting at. And there are a lot of benefits because of this peer-to-peer network. Benefits such as autonomy, benefits such as not having, well, we'll go into more of those, but let's just start with a peer-to-peer network and a lot of autonomy. Make sense so far? Good. All right. Then if you think like I do, you got tired of the visual slides and you want to see some architecture. This should look familiar to you, right? I mean, the components that you see here are relatively normal. Network storage, security, hashing algorithms, encryption, digital signatures. These are the things that you would anticipate. What you wouldn't anticipate is this consensus piece, because why? It's new. That's part of blockchain. It's the most complicated segment. We've got, as I mentioned before, there are different algorithms that have evolved over time for the blockchain platforms. And depending on your use case, you might want to use a different algorithm or consensus method for your blockchain platform. The POW is proof of right, the POS is proof of stake, decentralized proof of stake, and then you've got PBF, fault tolerance. I can't go into detail with you about the differences between each, but what I'll share with you is that, again, depending on your specific use case, you're going to pick the blockchain platform and consensus method that makes sense. On top of that layer are services that the platform can give to you. We'll talk about smart contracts moving forward, programmable assets, incentive mechanisms, and membership management. Membership management being all of us. And then on top of that layer, you see core application components. And that's the concept of decentralized applications. So if some of these things are new terms, hopefully all of this will become a cohesive message as we go through the evolution of blockchain. One click. All right. So you can see here, I'd like to give credit to the sources. This is a book called Blockchain Blueprint for a New Economy by Melanie Swan. So if you're interested in learning more about blockchain, this is a great book to read. But what I really like about this slide is the fact that it breaks blockchain down into the three primary tiers of evolution. The first one being, obviously, programmable currency with Bitcoin. The second one being programmable finances, which we'll talk about through Ethereum. And the third one being programmable society, and that's with Hyperledger. And that's the one that's probably going to impact most of you, especially if you're in healthcare or something like that. In each one of these evolutions, the use cases have expanded. So I suspect that if you're in this room, more than likely, you're probably going to be in the latter of the two categories. You're interested in the latter of the two categories. So let's start off with the first evolution, which is Bitcoin. By showing of hands, how many of you have Bitcoins? That's great. Okay. How many of you are familiar with the concept of Bitcoins? That's 99.9%. Okay. All right, next slide. Okay. So the concept, just to reiterate, just to recap, the concept of Bitcoin is it's flat currency. You can think of it as your money, as the dollars that you have in your pocket today. But when we think about the differences in that decentralized network, that peer-to-peer network that I was talking about earlier, the value that you have with Bitcoin is that you have no restrictions now. If I want to send him Bitcoins, I can, peer-to-peer. Don't have to go through an intermediary entity. If I want to send Bitcoins from here to California, I can. If I want to send them from here to France, I can. I don't have to go through a third party. But the body, the group of us, are going to approve or unapprove those transactions. Okay, we got the one click down now. So if that didn't make sense, it's always helpful to have a visual representation of what I'm talking about. And I think when you look at this slide, it's the traditional model versus the peer-to-peer model with Bitcoin. The traditional model is something like PayPal, for example. I use PayPal, right? I mean, I'm sure many of us use PayPal. But the concept behind PayPal is if I'm user A and you all represent user B, I'm going to make a request to my bank and work through the clearinghouse, which is PayPal. PayPal is going to contact your bank and then ultimately notify you that you've got whatever I sent you, right? In addition to that, what is PayPal going to do to me? They're going to tax me. They're going to get their small percentage in their fee. They're also going to have on record my transaction, what transpired between you and I, which is why they ask, hey, what is this for, et cetera, et cetera. In contrast, when we look at Bitcoin, there is no clearinghouse. Because going back to the initial point that I stated, there is no centrally managed component here. In this case, if I'm user A and you all are user B, I broadcast my transaction request to the Bitcoin network. And upon approval, you receive your Bitcoins. That's it. It's anonymous. I mean, sure, there's like, the hash code, the hash string for my name and your name, but we're unidentifiable to the public. Yet the records of what's transpired is public. So there's transparency and autonomy. But I have flexibility. I'm not going through the bank. I'm not going through the federal system. I'm not doing any of that. So if you're tracking where I'm going with this, the next question in your mind should be, well, how robust is the Bitcoin network? In May, there was roughly about 6,900 global nodes running. You can see the brunt of them being in the United States, with Germany coming in second place. This is probably one of my areas of concern with these nodes. Because if you think about most financial institutions, pick one, Bank of America, Chase, et cetera, et cetera. All of us in here, we manage these data centers. They've got racks and racks and racks of hardware compute that are dedicated to crunch these numbers, right? They crunch the transactions that are taking place. We have no centralized managed system here, right, with blockchain. So who is the onus on to do that number crunching? Us, the community. And that's what these nodes represent. So personally, again, the This is research, right? This is yet to be proven. I'm just going by some of the things that I've seen. This is one of my areas of concern. Because initially when the novelty of Bitcoin and blockchain first started, there was a large impetus of people, or within people, to take responsibility and manage these nodes. You gain nothing in managing these nodes. You personally gain nothing. There's not a financial reward. You get the Good Samaritan reward, this one right here, for maintaining the integrity of the Bitcoin network. That's what you receive. There are methods which they call mining, which you can receive, you can get Bitcoin profits from, but it's a little bit different, right? Because in these nodes that we're specifically talking about here, for the most part, these nodes are responsible for reviewing transactions, the approval of those transactions. They're selected pools and subsets. Versus with mining, you're literally saying, hey, I'm going to work with Ethereum and I'm going to do mining for Ethereum, and if my computer or my computers with all of the brand new ASICs that I purchased and hardware compute crunch through this many numbers, this many cycles over this many hours, I'm going to get paid this amount of currency. Two different things. You have the ability to do both. Where do you think most people are incentivized? Mining. The money. The challenge with this, though, with the mining, is that you've got to figure out a way to beat the hardware compute, because it's going to take power and current from your personal bill. So you've got to make sure that you found a way, whether it's solar power or maybe you're at your company's office and you're running virtual machines or something like that, but you've got to offset the cost of electricity, right? You also, I don't think many of you have liquid nitrogen running through your garages, so you've got to figure out ways to get around these types of things. But that's one personal concern of mine. When we talk about these blockchain nodes, you'll see here that it's a replicated state machine. And the terminology is distributed ledger technology. It's distributed ledger because, I mean, it makes sense, right? If all of you represent a node, we're all distributed. But all of us have the same ledger. In order for that to occur, it means that person A and person B, in this case, are making a request for a transaction. They have to receive consensus from the group. Depending on the algorithm that we were talking about at the beginning, once they receive consensus, then you'll see it committed over on the right-hand side in orange and blue, representing each one of those transactions. All right. Now, if that made sense, the next question in your head is, how is all this maintained? Looks cool, sounds easy, but it's got to be more difficult than that. Well, the name blockchain in itself is synonymous for what it is, right? Blocks and chains. By definition, the block itself is an encapsulation of transactions. You get multiple blocks with multiple transactions, they're chained together or linked together. When you create another additional block, it gets appended to the end of the last block. And the sequence keeps going like that and growing. Because of that sequence, you'll see that it's immutable. The order can't change. The order can't change. Well, again, techies in the room, right? What do you mean the order can't change? How is that possible? The order can't change because in order for it to change, it would require consensus. Consensus from all of us, right? So let's talk about that. If we look at the data structure again, there are two ways that we maintain that integrity within the blocks and the chains themselves. The first way is in the actual block. Each block has a hash that says, this is the sequence within the hash of these said transactions. There's also a second hash, which is for the parent. It says, I'm mapped to this block in front of you. So there are two mechanisms. One for the integrity, and one to maintain the sequence. And here's a representation of that. You can see block 101, 102, 103, fingerprint of this block, fingerprint of the last block. And it looks something like this with pointers. Each one pointing to what? Predecessor. So when you think about Bitcoin characteristics and why it's so appealing to so many, the overarching themes are it's maintained by a group and it's transparent. And I think we've demonstrated that. We've talked about that, right? In addition to that, it's decentralized, it's tamper-proof, and anonymous. These are all attractive things about Bitcoin. Okay. That takes us to the next layer. The next evolution of Bitcoin and blockchain, which is Ethereum. Okay, anybody recognize this young man? Oh, I know someone that, I know for a fact some of you should know exactly who he is. Anybody raise your hand if you know who this person is? Exactly. I'm sure everyone in this room, if you've used BitTorrent, have done it in a legal manner. But this is the guy that created BitTorrent. Arguably, perhaps the first decentralized app created. Arguably. So, Vitalik liked Bitcoin, but it wasn't enough for him. He wanted more. Right? So, he did a couple different things. The first thing is he created his own currency, which is called Ether. Right? The second thing is he added what you see there, which is called smart contracts. So this was a stored cache on top of the blockchain platform. The third thing he did was he created a programmable language called Solidity, so that me, you, everyone in this room could create decentralized applications. The best thing about what he's created, or what he created, was the fact that he turned blockchain into a world computer. Because now all the use cases expanded. It's no longer about transfer of services. There are a number of different verticals that this can be used in. Obviously, the financial sector took advantage of it the most. But from a consumer perspective, we'll talk about, the next slide we'll talk about the smart contracts, but the ability to take advantage of smart contracts allowed what you're seeing here as these examples. Property management, finance, crowdfunding, social networking and messaging systems. And you notice that I put with the social networking and messaging system, user-protected data, right? Because you're probably thinking to yourself, yeah, I use WhatsApp or I use Facebook Messenger, but who's responsible for that data? Exactly. In these cases, you're responsible for your own data. Your peer-to-peer network is responsible for that data. So if you're concerned about Big Brother, or you just like your own privacy, for whatever the reason, you're able to do that with this platform. One click. All right. Now, smart contracts are somewhat tricky to explain because they're self-executing contracts. You can literally think of a wager. Let's say me and this gentleman in the front row here. I've got a wager that says that at the end of the day, he's going to ask the best question out of everyone else in this room, right? It's based on a trigger or some type of event. Both he and I decide to put money in the pot, and based on the event of that trigger, the result ends in one of us getting paid, more than likely him. That's the idea of this contract. But if you think about it, the premise behind blockchain was to remove centralized management. So if I want to have some type of partnership with you, how do I go about doing that in a coded fashion without having to implement, without having to deal with a person to manage over it? And that's essentially what we created here. You'll see here that Nick Szabo created this concept in 1994, but he didn't have a platform like Ethereum to take advantage of. And so that's why you're seeing it now. And then I added this last bullet because, I don't know, for whatever the reason, it's very difficult to describe smart contracts and the use cases for it. So for those of you that have dealt with relational databases, a smart contract is to a blockchain what I see a stored procedure is to a relational database. Does that make sense? See nods? Yeah, okay. Now what's the value of all this stuff that we've created, that we've talked about here? These decentralized applications. What's really cool is that Their project, well, what you'll see here are three categories, right? Project names that are decentralized applications, the activity, and then the centralized equivalent. So for example, the first one is Craigslist on the right-hand side. I'm not sure if the people in the back can see it, that's why I'm reading it to you. But on the top right-hand corner, it says Craigslist. The activity is obviously to buy and sell items locally. You can go to Open Bazaar right now, openbazaar.org, and you'll find a way to do that with Bitcoins. One that I thought was interesting was, I looked at the Uber and Lyft version, right? You can leverage Bitcoins, right, and build a community to do rideshare. And the list goes on and on, from, obviously from Twitter and SMS, which I took a look at because I was curious. The challenge that I ran into on that one is I was like, well, who am I going to SMS if my friends aren't on it? So that means I have to get my friends on it first, so that, But you get the concept here. It's a community that's growing, and the thought is that, really think outside the box here. Like, in so many cases, our minds are programmed to accept what we've been used to doing, right? And what's going on here is a revolutionary shift of how we can do things differently. And what I think is unique about this is that it's not specific to one vertical. This is global, and it's spanning almost every aspect of our life and some of the most important and critical aspects of our lives. This is where, this is the VMware guy speaking, this is Eddie Blackwell speaking. This is something that's important to me because at some point, whether you have something to hide or not, privacy is privacy. And I think we all, like in the tech community, it's less about what someone has to hide, it's about protecting your rights. And so if I have a conversation with this young lady in the front, the conversation that we have is between her and I. It's not saved somewhere for everyone else to review. And there's something to be said with this technology that allows that privacy to be maintained on a number of different levels. So think about that. And as you think about that, let's move on to the third evolution of blockchain, which is Hyperledger. And quite honestly, I think this is the one that's going to resonate with many of you in this room because it's the broadest of all of them. The Linux Foundation project launched in December 2015. There were 30 founding members, and you can see that they range from technology to finance to blockchain. 130 plus members, 110 plus contributors. And if you hold on a second, I'm going to read through each one of these customers. What I will tell you though is that, well, I can't jump that out. What I will tell you, no, I can't. What I can tell you is that next to Wells Fargo over there in the second row, you'll see VMware. So we were a contributing member as well. But what's the commonality, or how about this? What's the delta that you see between these members and what I've shared with you in blockchain 1 and 2? What difference are you seeing? In the back with the blue. Are you waving? Sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay. That's the right answer. Okay.
More members.
Right? The delta, I'll answer this one. The delta that you're seeing here is within the community. Up until this point, what we've talked about are community members like you and I. In this example with Hyperledger, you're dealing with organizations. This is business, this is enterprise. Which should make you wonder to yourself, what are the goals of Hyperledger? Well, obviously enterprise-grade distributed ledger technology based on blockchain. And it makes complete sense, right? I mean, if nothing else to me, this is affirmation of where this vertical is going. Businesses watched and saw that this technology grew organically and said, maybe there's a way that we can put enterprise-grade functionality and standardization around it to improve our businesses. Now, there's some differences in the requirements that are needed between us as the community and the businesses, and we'll talk about some of those. But some of the benefits that you gain in this Hyperledger platform would be a cross-industry blockchain effort. And that's spanning things like from manufacturing to healthcare to IoT, you name it, all across the board. The projects and the contributions are modular, they're performance ready, and they're reliable, and I think most of you probably appreciate the licensing, right? So at this point, you might want to do a little comparison. it probably would have been easier if I put them in sequential order, but I did not. And you see the hyperledger, which is listed in the first column, or actually the second column. Bitcoin in the third, and Ethereum in the fourth. And there's some similarity, a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences. You can see, for example, in hyperledger, there is no currency, there is no mining, but there is in the other two, in the predecessors. For the state of the data, I mean, we've got the key and value system, right? Which makes sense because it's enterprise versus the other two, which are transaction and account data. On the consensus, we talked about those methods. Those range across the board. Networks, makes sense. Privacy, significant difference. You'll see privacy as a factor within the hyperledger, but not so much in Bitcoin and Ethereum, for obvious reasons. And then smart contracts. We talk about the languages that are being leveraged there.
Go ahead. Can I ask a question, Ed? So you say privacy is a big deal here. Is that privacy manageable by the individual, or is it only managed by the enterprise?
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I was trying to find it. Yes, it is manageable. It's manageable by, in this case, well, in that case with the hyperledger, it would be managed by whoever. You, the end user. There's someone that's going to have a management role in this case, and that person that has management roles can set that up.
If I'm interacting with an enterprise which is maintaining a ledger of our interactions, what do I get to say about my data in their ledger? They manage the ledger.
True. True. But there'd be a separation in that scenario, right? Because the use case, the primary use case in this hyperledger is more so for the business versus the other side being personal.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks.
No problem. Great question. Okay. So next one, projects in hyperledger. There's several. I just put the big four out, what I deem as the big four. Start on from right to left. Blockchain Explorer, very similar to when you want to do a SQL query. Same thing kind of holds true with Blockchain Explorer. Iroha, I just like saying that, Iroha. For many corporations, you want to embrace the blockchain technology, and you need something that's easy to implement, adaptable, and has a lot of things in place. And that's where Iroha comes in. The Sawtooth Lake, when we talk about this decentralized ledger, one of the challenges that you run into is that depending on how large your group is and how dispersed it is, when you start doing the algorithm crunching for consensus, it's time consuming and it's not always energy efficient. Sawtooth Lake addresses that. And then the last piece here is Fabric. And Fabric allows you to create these decentralized applications. It's probably the most mature out of the four that I've listed here. All right, so I think we're doing okay on time, right?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. So since this is the most mature, I figured I'd spend a little bit of time highlighting it. You can see it's open sourced in December 2015. The major part of the code came from IBM's OBC, the open blockchain, and then you can see they received help from a couple other companies in creating somewhat of a consortium. Developed in Golang, which is Google's code, and also uses containers. So shout out to the lady that was presenting before us. All of us can work in harmony. Okay. Next question you should be asking yourself is, well, what are the characteristics, right? And I think some of these are going to be intuitive to you. Transaction confidentiality, to your question, obviously that was important. Access control, again. Dynamic scaling of the nodes. Better throughput, and then upgradable smart contracts. And that's a tricky one when we have upgradable smart contracts. Suggestion, we don't have time today, my suggestion would be spend a little time on that one. And then I always think it's always helpful to have, somewhat of a flow. If you can visualize this, I know we've talked a lot, but it might be helpful to actually see some of this stuff. So in this case, this is the transaction lifecycle in Hyperledger, and Hyperledger Fabric was one of those. And you can see that an application submits a proposal. It goes to the endorsing peer, and this proposal basically gets shot out to all of the folks in the network, all of the different nodes in the network. And there's an approval or denial from the other folks in the network, which goes into the lines of the consensus. Upon consensus, you submit the transaction, which you're seeing in step number 4. I guess I could use the mouse, but I'm afraid I'm going to make everything go too fast. But after that submission of the transaction, you see the ordering services, the transaction, the reads and write occur, and it's committed to the ledger. It's a fairly simple process, and this is all with decentralizing applications. I feel like one thing that they've done extremely well is made this very clean. All right. So we're starting to get close to wrapping up here, and I wanted to spend some time at least giving you a visual on some of the use cases, or at least making them more concrete for you. Obviously, in the center of this bubble is blockchain, and surrounding that bubble are things that we've talked about in reasonable depth. We've talked about smart contracts, we've talked about digital currency, we've talked about record keeping, and we've talked about securities. Outside of that, you can see the use cases as they would pertain to your business. So in my mind, depending on what your interest was, what drew you into this session, someone paid you $20, or you plan on throwing tomatoes at the end of the session, or maybe you're thinking about how does this fit into my business or life. My mind says start on the outside. What's of interest to you? So for example, if you're interested in healthcare, you can obviously see record keeping is something that's important to you, right? So then I'm going to say, okay, well, record keeping is important to me. Which blockchain platforms are going to allow me to do so? And then I'm going to say to myself, similar questions to this gentleman asked. How am I going to mesh my personal ledger with the ledger of the business? Because there are ways that these worlds can come together. You can have two private networks that can still communicate at a higher level, right? We do this all the time in IoT and things like that, right? So there are ways that all of these worlds can come together, but as a starting point, I share with you these use cases because they're extremely broad. And in a short amount of time, you can clearly see how we've evolved from Bitcoin or blockchain 1.0, which was, hey, instead of me giving you $5, let me give you a Bitcoin for 2 pieces, right? Or 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 pieces. I think we've come a long way here. So when I see, I started off by saying, a lot of comparisons to where blockchain is and its growth and potential in comparison to the internet. And if you think about it, in a short period of time from 2008 to 2017, this is where we're at. I'd say that's relatively impressive for anyone. So, in summary, obviously blockchain is a combination of a number of different technologies. While I'm very excited about the technology, I don't want to misguide you and tell you that it's a silver bullet for everything. There's still a lot of challenges that need to be resolved. I don't know how many of you saw last night, there was a posting that I think it was roughly about 30 million. Was it 30 million that was extracted from one of the crypto wallets? I forgot the name of the company. It was late at night. I've got a newborn, so I'm on limited sleep no matter what. But what's that? It is CoinDash, thank you. It was CoinDash. So roughly 30 million. So the interesting thing about your Bitcoins is that you know how it's identified, or similar to a $5 bill. If I give you a $5 bill, if I give you a $5 bill right now, how can you prove it's yours? Nothing, right? With your Bitcoins, you've got a key, right, more or less. But that's really it. So once it's out there, it's out there. There's really nothing that says, hey, this belongs to Eddie Blackwell. If I lose my wallet, I lose my wallet. And that's essentially what happened last night. There are websites, or companies, I should say, they're not websites, they're companies that will manage your Bitcoins. And one of the problems that we're facing right now are that some of these companies are getting hacked, right? So anyway, a lot of things that we still need to uncover, which means for all of us that are techies and engineers, any challenge can be turned into an opportunity. So food for thought on that one. All right. Lastly, well, not lastly, but close to lastly, I did want to talk to you about where VMware's at in this. And initially I had some slides that were talking about some concrete things that we were working on. You can publicly Google VMware's R&D and put in blockchain, and you'll come up with something that says probably Byzantine, Paxos, something, a vertical or something like that, right? The challenge is, I think it was like 2015, 2016. The reality of the matter is that this is a moving target for VMware, and we're spending a lot of time and energy researching where we want to put our energy and our focus. These are the 3 layers that we've identified, and I could throw some other features up there like, hey, we're going to focus on smart contracts and specifically do this. Hey, we're going to focus on deploying nodes that, but it's to be determined. It's to be determined at this point. And did I tell you that VMworld's coming up soon?
What?
Okay. So I've got a little bit of golden handcuffs on that one. But I did list Michael DiPetrillo, a good friend of mine, also director of blockchain. So if you're interested in having an NDA discussion about where we're going with blockchain, I don't have the ability to share a lot more detail with you publicly, but we can share it with you under NDA. So if you have more interest in understanding exactly what we're looking at doing, and literally that's going to be within the next couple of days, feel free to email Mike DiPetrillo or just contact me and I will tee you up with Mike DiPetrillo and someone that can get that arrangement going for you. I think everyone probably read the green slide which said the enterprise-grade technology foundations for blockchain frameworks. You know, I think if we've talked about nodes quite a bit, right? And we all know what VMware's good at. So I think some of these things should be relatively intuitive, but there will be some other bells and whistles that outside of the norm of what VMware's good at, which is managing and simplifying the data center. Okay. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the VMUG. I want to make sure that you get resources. I know that this spawned from the VMUG, and I think it's awesome personally. I think that's the purpose of all of these forums. I personally don't like the idea of the pitch pony kind of thing, like, hey, you must buy VMware technology and or vendor X. I think the intent of groups and meetings like this is for us to get the synergy of all thoughts together, and you leave with a new idea where you each one kind of teach one kind of thing. That is the value of programs and events like this, in my humble opinion. Another resource, I've got this, I work in the office of the CTO, but we also have what we call CTO ambassadors. These CTO ambassadors have the same mission of the office of the CTO. As you can see here, it is to drive thought leadership and accelerate technology leadership. They do this via talking to you as customers, working with partners, and then also championing messages back from product management. They're extensions of the Office of the CTO in the field. We've got several hundred of them. I say of them, I fall in that category too. I'm just thinking those two. We have project initiatives. My point being is that in many cases, you may want to have a technical discussion like this, and maybe your SC, he or she, and/or your TAM, he or she is working on a number of different, working with a number of different accounts. But what you can do, regardless of the number of accounts they have, you can ask them to put you in touch with a CTO ambassador on the topic of your choice, and you'll get grade A access to product management folks like me or Mike DiPetrillo or whoever else. All right. Lastly, this is lastly. I think. Yeah, it is. Promise. Right? Lastly, we talked about Bitcoin quite a bit, but I want to encourage all of you to kind of get your hands dirty a little bit. So I wanted to share with you 6 other cryptocurrencies other than Bitcoin, and that's roughly about the top 6. There's a chart there that kind of shows who's in first place, and the gold there is on the chart is Bitcoin, obviously. But I think the second place is, well, I think that's Ripple. I'm not sure what it is. It might be a Ethereum. Yeah, it is Ethereum. Okay. All right. So that being said, that's it. We got past all of it. No double clicking, triple clicking on slides. Appreciate your attention. Thank you for having me, and go forth and prosper.
if you think about this, if you have to stop at healthcare or bank records, I mean, how many times do you go to a doctor in another state? Wouldn't it be awesome if your records were down there so they knew what was going on with you? I mean, I think of the use cases of blockchain, it just boggles my mind. So thank you very much. Hey, our next speaker is going to come on at 11, so we've got about half an hour before then. So feel free to go visit sponsors, grab a drink, whatever you need. And Mike will be on at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much.